So I wanted to start off with a little bit of an introduction. Who is Jay Bobzin, and why should you care what I have to say? Um, I studied computer science at UMass Amherst, and this was, you know, started over 20 years ago, and um, it was a good experience for me. I think that there's a lot in a computer science education, a lot of value in a computer science education that, um, well, it absolutely is not required to start a career in programming. I think the benefits sort of show up throughout your career from understanding these things at a deep level. One particularly interesting part of my study was um, my last semester. I studied reinforcement learning. I took a graduate class in reinforcement learning in the computer science department, as well as studying reinforcement learning in the psychology department, and was able to um, pick up and notice some interesting trends that have really continued through my career to this day. And I'm sure we'll touch on those, especially given the prominence of artificial intelligence in sort of modern application development, which absolutely is one of my goals to get into over time. Um, my first couple of jobs were, you know, not all that inspiring. It was a tough market coming out in 2006, and they were interesting companies in their own right. Galatea uh, worked with clients in the finance space, and I was there for the market crashes in sort of 2007, 2008. And was interesting to have an inside view into that world, and also to just learn. The primary work was to study systems that were originally written in COBOL in the 70s, and actually have deployed some COBOL, which is pretty unique, um, and build modern distributed Java-based replacements for them. And uh, absolutely, this is where I sort of first learned. A couple of big lessons come to mind. One, the importance of respecting production. When you're operating on systems that deal with very sensitive customer data and transactions and bookkeeping, then how you deploy code is incredibly important. And then also just the subtlety of, even a highly technical system like this, understanding the end users and developing a personal relationship with them was absolutely critical to doing that job well. Um, and this was my favorite aspect of that job. And so when I left Galatea, I was looking for work that would, bring me more in direct contact with users. And CRA certainly did that. We worked on, I don't want to go too much into detail. These were government contracts, but we worked on a project that had a lot of support, a lot of interest from the group we worked with. Um, One of the most interesting lessons that I took out of that was actually when we went to meet with the group of users who were using our software. And we had this really complicated um, um, kind of cognitive science based approach to um, solving their problems, and which is really interesting and sort of derived from Bayesian networks, which some of you may be familiar with. Um, it was very interesting from the science side, but when we actually got there and talked to the users, what we found out was that the reason they really liked our tool was because it helped them with their paperwork, and they really couldn't have cared too much less about the thing we thought was the exciting feature. So Definitely got some good early lessons here about the value of talking with your customers, but overall was not feeling fully satisfied with my career trajectory at this point. And so, at the end of 2011, I moved to DC, new city. This was the last time I made a big move, similar to the one I'm making now, where I sort of left my existing, relatively successful career to branch out and try something very new. And that's what brought me to Android. Um, I was attracted to Android pretty early. 2012, was Froyo was the major uh, Android version that people were using at the time, and 2.3, I believe. So it's before the big 4.0 um, release, which sort of brought Android into a little closer parity with iOS in terms of user experience. But I've never liked the uh, sort of locked in walled garden nature of the iOS ecosystem, and I've always sort of resented that. So I loved my iPhone when I had one, but I switched to Android pretty early, mostly for these sort of philosophical reasons and the ability to um, you know own my own device, really own it, really sort of feel like I could uh, make tweaks and customizations to my device, and that it was ultimately my hardware. And even Android has sort of moved away from that nature over time, but it's still, I think, maintains that flavor, and that's the thing that has attracted me to Android development, which has been a good career for me. I started one of the first things I have here is technology guru for the Bulletproof Executive. Essentially, I reached out to Dave Asprey, who was a blogger that I um, was really a big fan of at the time, especially, and asked. I reached out to a few people who I wanted to get into Android, and um, I didn't have any real experience. So I reached out to some folks that I would want to work with, and I said, "Hey, is there anything that I can build you for free?" And we did collaborate on an app that wasn't actually all that successful, and we ended up taking it down. But I did some other work for him for about a year, and that was pretty cool. Toe in the door, um, type of thing that I think I definitely recommend if you're looking to break into a space, and you can, to you know if you can. Sometimes free is better than cheap, because as soon as money is involved, then there becomes a certain set of expectations. But you can get away with some stuff early on if you're willing to work for free, and um, maybe get introduced to more interesting people that way. I did some consulting work, and worked with a company called Savvy Apps for about a year, um, which introduced me to some bigger clients and some more stable paychecks. And then that's where Social Radar found me, and I worked with them for a year on helping get their mobile app. I was the lead Android engineer for that app, and that was the first, um, you know, uh, well-funded customer application that I was the architect on. And that's what I was doing when Uber found me. This is sort of the first phase of my Uber tenure. I joined the rider experience team in 2014. There was three Android engineers on the rider experience team at that time, and three iOS engineers. And by the time I left the company, there was you know well over 100 mobile engineers, 300 engineers total, and a team that when I joined was about 10 people. So I saw a lot of growth at that company, and had a lot of great experience, a lot of which is going to show up. Um, I after the after 2016, when we did a big rewrite of ground up rewrite of the Uber app, and I was sort of one of the leads from the product side, from the rider side. So we had a mobile platform team who was certainly the lead for the overall architecture, but in terms of the rider app itself, um, I was one of the key people for that project, and got I think that definitely a lot of what I would like to sort of uh, finalize or crystallize or get into code is some of the lessons that I learned during that period. But after that, I was wanting to branch out a little bit, and so I did 6 months as an iOS engineer, and also my first data engineering work for the external API, the developer platform. Um, and then found my way to the shared rides team, which focused on Uber Pool, and ultimately high capacity vehicles is where I found myself as the lead of a pretty high profile project that we launched in Egypt and Mexico and a few other markets. And certainly some good lessons from that period that I will be looking to pass on. I'm just thinking about this was a project where instead of being a ground up rewrite, we now have an app which is 3 years old. I was 3 years since we started, 2 years since it launched, and I was one of the few people remaining who really understood how that app worked from bottom to top. And that's a very different type of architecture when you're working from the ground up versus when you're trying to take an existing app that works one way and convince it to work in a different way, in a way that is going to be safe for, of course, nobody wanted the work we were doing to put the core product at risk. And um, I'm happy to say that we were able to launch this with very, very minor, no major disruptions to the core Uber service, which um, had a lot to do with how we built it. Um, and after that, I was put into a sort of higher level role, looking at data engineering across the team in general. This was, I think, one of the other unifying themes of my time at Uber was just seeing how much we were limited by uh, the quality and capability of our analytics, and especially as it related to these efficiency driven products, shared rides, high capacity vehicles, where understanding how user behavior and the sort of marketplace dynamics that were so important for these products to be successful. How much was uh, extra wait time, or having to walk further for a pickup? How much efficiency was that buying us, and how much inconvenience or other um, signs of user dissatisfaction? Understanding the relationship between all these was incredibly complicated, and is something that I think is at the core of application design is observability, and how do you understand what's happening in your app. So a lot of valuable lessons to share from that. But sort of the COVID era, um, I became a father, and working in a team that size started to feel like not really the right place for me. So I joined a much smaller team in 2022, the DYDX trade crypto trading platform, and did some really interesting work with them. There's some, we'll talk about the news as it becomes public, but DYDX is a fully decentralized crypto exchange, and that, of course, provides its own set of challenges when architecting a mobile app. And yeah, a lot of what I want to get into over the next couple of months are sort of lessons in distributed application architecture and how to build apps that work in today's world where there isn't necessarily a single server that can uh, manage the entire app's flow of information, where the application itself has to be more of a driver of the how the app works. By the application itself, I mean the the native code, the code that's running on your phone, or I'd like to actually get sort of the connection between the user's phone and desktop computers. I feel like is a place where there's a lot of room to fill some gaps that get left when you lose the centralized server. So yeah, that was the role that I left recently, and I'm looking to sort of build on a lot of this experience as I think about, okay, what, as I go to build my next applications, what are the pieces of all of this that I'd like to have baked into an architecture that I can carry with me as I go forward.